In this video, we're going to connect our DC power source, our PV array. So the way to do that is to go back on the roof. We have left our two wires, with one with our lockout on there, and we're going to connect our positive and negative. At this point, we have wired up all our components, and we've done a visual inspection to check that all the wires are in the right location. The next step of the process is connecting our power sources. And in our grid-tied battery-less system, we have two power sources. We have the grid and we have the modules. Here's our module power source. And the way we're going to supply power to our equipment is from our, what we call the home runs, or the output wires of our string. We have one positive and one negative for our string. I did a visual inspection underneath to make sure I didn't see anything unconnected or any wires dripping. Made sure everything was dressed and tight. So here are my output wires for my string, and those two will go to these two, which are our pass-through box. These wires are connected to my DC disconnect, where my inverter is located. And right now the DC disconnect has a lock on it, because once I connect these wires, then we have voltage in the DC disconnect, and we need to make sure no one can get in there. So, knowing that the lock is down there and in my pocket, I now can take this lock off and connect this power source, and I'll do that right now. After I make these connections, I need to do final dressing underneath here and get my cable clips that we talked about earlier, and make sure all this wire is secured under the frame and not dripping onto the roof. Now we have our final management of this wire underneath here, and we can go down and turn on, or at least supply power from the grid to our AC disconnect. So now ready to go into my meter. Or my switch. It looks exactly the same as it did before, except now if I touch the wrong parts without insulation, it will kill me. Looks the same. That's the thing about electricity, right? Can't see it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check, make sure I have the right polarity and voltage coming off my array. I'm going to set my meter to volts DC, and my negative is here on this bar, and my positive is right here. And I'm getting my voltage reading 240 volts. I don't see a negative sign. That means the negative sign doesn't work, and it's wrong wired, or everything's correct. So what I usually do is I'll take my two leads and switch them intentionally. My red is positive, black is negative for my meter, so I'll intentionally switch my polarity and try to see that negative sign, which I now do, negative. So this is what I do every time. I want to make sure I'm delivering the right voltage to my inverter. And I'll even do a triple check, make sure that positive sign or that negative sign is not present, which it is not. And so that looks good. I'll confirm my connection to ground as well. Those two are connected properly, and my voltage from my grounded conductor, white, to ground, I have 0, which is correct, because that's my grounded conductor. There should be no potential from there to there. The potential from my hot to negative and hot to ground should be the same. I've confirmed the voltage in here is correct. I'm going to close this. I know my DC is good. Now let's go over to the AC side and check that. We've finished delivering power to our DC side and checking voltage and polarity. That was correct. Now let's do it on the AC side. Power source here is the grid, and was being delivered through our breaker, which I've removed the lockout just before the video started, and so now I don't have to mess with that now, but now I just can turn my breaker on. This is going to send power through. This is just a customer-owned meter, but it's going and powering in the top side of this AC disconnect. So I'm going to throw this breaker, then I'll go into there and measure voltage and polarity. Now before I go in there, making sure I got my gloves on. There should be, at this point, should be 240 volts AC in there. Here's my meter set on volts AC. And again, the grid is on the top, so from red to black I should find 240 volts. And I do 247. And then I can go from each line to neutral and find about half of that, 123, 123 and a half. So my AC power to here is good. I guess the last thing to do is to send the DC and AC power to the inverter. So let's do that next.